Dogs do not wait for strangers, Jack Mercer said the first time someone asked about Titan. If he keeps coming back, there is a reason. The people of Harbor Point laughed when they heard it. Small towns always had stories. An old fisherman claimed he had once seen a seal follow a lobster boat for 3 days. A waitress swore a gull stole the same blueberry muffin every Friday morning. Compared to those tales, a German shepherd sitting outside a cottage hardly seemed remarkable. Yet after the 3rd week, even the locals began to notice. Every morning just after sunrise, Titan left the front porch of Jack's weathered coastal home and trotted down Shoreline Road. The route never changed. Past the harbor. Past the bait shop. Past the white church overlooking the bay. Then he stopped in front of a small gray cottage near the edge of town. There he sat. Motionless. Patient. Watching. The cottage belonged to Emma Brooks. She was 42 years old and known by everyone, yet somehow known by no one. She volunteered at the library. She baked pies for charity fundraisers. She remembered birthdays. She helped elderly neighbors carry groceries. People liked her. Trusted her. But when conversations drifted toward her past, Emma always smiled and gently changed the subject. Nobody pushed. Harbor Point respected privacy. At first, Emma thought Titan's visits were accidental. Then she noticed the pattern. Every morning. Every afternoon. Sometimes even after sunset. The dog would appear and sit quietly near the fence. He never barked. Never growled. Never demanded attention. He simply watched the house with an intensity that made her uneasy. One foggy morning she stepped onto her porch carrying a mug of coffee. The scent of salt and pine drifted through the cool air. Titan was already there. Sitting exactly where he always sat. Emma looked down at him. "You again?" she asked softly. The German shepherd tilted his head. His amber eyes never left her face. Something about that gaze sent a chill through her. Not fear. Recognition. The feeling vanished as quickly as it came. Emma shook her head and returned inside. Across town, Jack was beginning to worry. Titan was 8 years. Old now. Older. Wiser. The dog had spent years beside him through training grounds, deployments, and long quiet nights after service ended. Jack trusted him completely. Which was why none of this made sense. Titan had never fixated on a person before. That evening Jack followed him. The harbor glowed beneath streaks of orange sunset. Fishing boats rocked gently against wooden docks. Titan moved with purpose, leading Jack directly back to Emma's cottage. When they arrived, the house was dark except for a single light glowing upstairs. Titan stopped at the gate and sat. Again. Jack folded his arms. "What are you trying to tell me, buddy?" The German shepherd remained still. A curtain shifted in the upstairs window. For the briefest moment, Jack saw Emma standing there. Watching them. Then she disappeared from sight. Titan suddenly rose to his feet. Every muscle in his body tightened. His ears lifted. His breathing changed. Slowly, he lowered his nose toward the ground near the fence. Then he froze. Hidden beneath the scent of sea air and damp cedar was something only Titan recognized. And whatever it was, the old dog had not forgotten it. The scent lingered long after Titan and Jack returned home. It followed the dog into the night like a memory refusing to stay buried. Harbor Point slept beneath a blanket of coastal fog. Porch lights glowed softly through the mist. Waves rolled against the rocky shoreline with a slow rhythm that usually calmed Titan. Not tonight. The German shepherd paced the living room floor. Back and forth. Back and forth. Jack watched from his armchair, concern growing with every pass. Titan was not anxious. He was thinking. Jack had learned long ago that there was a difference. Some dogs reacted. Titan remembered. Around midnight, the dog stopped beside an old cedar chest near the fireplace. He lowered his nose and nudged the lid. Once. Then again. Jack frowned. The chest held keepsakes from another chapter of life. Photographs. Unit patches. Training journals. Things he rarely touched anymore. Titan nudged the lid a third time. "All right," Jack muttered. "You have my attention." He opened the chest and began sorting through the contents. Dust floated through the warm lamplight. Most items carried familiar memories. Then Titan suddenly became still. His eyes locked onto a folded green cloth near the bottom. Jack picked it up. It was an old field scarf from years ago. Weathered. Faded. Nearly forgotten. The moment the fabric unfolded, Titan stepped forward and inhaled deeply. His entire posture changed. Not excitement. Recognition. Jack stared at the scarf. A faint scent still clung to it despite the years. He could barely detect it. Titan clearly could. The dog sat down and never looked away from the cloth. Somewhere inside Jack's mind, a door creaked open. A memory stirred but refused to fully emerge. The next morning arrived gray and cool. Emma Brooks opened the library at 8 o'clock as she always did. The smell of old books and fresh coffee filled the quiet building. Children would arrive later for reading programs. Retirees would gather near the newspapers. Everything appeared normal. Yet Emma felt unsettled. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Titan sitting outside her house. Watching. Waiting. As if he knew something she had spent years trying to forget. Shortly before noon, the library door opened. Jack entered with Titan beside him. Emma looked up from the circulation desk. For a brief second, surprise crossed her face before her usual smile returned. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," Jack replied. Titan remained calm. But his eyes never left her. Emma noticed. She always noticed. Jack approached the desk holding the folded scarf. "This may sound strange," he said carefully. "But has Titan ever seen you before?" The question seemed innocent enough. Yet the color drained slightly from Emma's face. Only for a moment. Then she smiled again. "I do not think so." Titan stepped closer. Emma's gaze shifted to the scarf in Jack's hand. Her smile disappeared. Not completely. Just enough. A tiny crack. A tiny mistake. But Jack saw it. More importantly, Titan saw it. The German Shepherd slowly sat beside the desk and stared at Emma as though he had finally found the person he had been searching for all these years. The silence inside the library seemed to stretch. Far longer than it actually did. Somewhere beyond the front windows, Harbor Point continued its ordinary day. Cars passed slowly along Main Street. A delivery truck stopped outside the bakery. Children laughed in the distance. Yet inside the building, everything felt suspended. Emma's eyes remained fixed on the faded field scarf resting in Jack's hand. She tried to look away. She could not. Titan noticed every detail. The slight tightening of her jaw. The hesitation in her breathing. The way her fingers curled around the edge of the circulation desk. The German Shepherd rose slowly and took 2 careful steps forward. Not threatening. Not demanding. Familiar. That was what made it unsettling. Jack watched the exchange with growing curiosity. He had spent years reading people under pressure. Emma's reaction was impossible to ignore. "Do you recognize it?" he asked gently. Emma blinked. The question seemed to pull her back into the room. "Recognize what?" Her voice sounded calm. Too calm. Jack glanced down at the scarf. This belonged to someone I knew a long time ago. For a brief moment, emotion flashed across Emma's face. Sadness. Deep and immediate. Then it disappeared behind another polite smile. I am sure many people own scarves like that. Jack nodded slowly. Perhaps. But Titan disagreed. The dog stopped directly in front of her and sat. His amber eyes never left hers. Emma looked down. The moment their gazes met, something shifted. The library faded away. The years faded away. At least for her. Memories surfaced uninvited. A different place. A different life. Endless stretches of sunlit roads. Temporary safe houses. Long conversations that always ended with uncertainty. And a young German shepherd who had insisted on following her everywhere despite repeated instructions not to. Her heart tightened. Titan tilted his head slightly. The exact same gesture. Emma felt her throat grow dry. That is impossible, she whispered. Jack heard it. What is impossible? Emma immediately shook her head. Nothing. But the answer arrived too quickly. Too defensively. Titan slowly lowered his nose toward the floor near the circulation desk. Then he moved toward a narrow hallway leading to the library archives. Employees only. Jack frowned. Titan. The dog ignored him. That almost never happened. He continued down the hallway with deliberate purpose. Emma's face lost color. Jack noticed instantly. What is back there? He asked. Storage rooms, she answered. Old records. Nothing important. Titan reached the end of the corridor and stopped beside a locked door. He placed one paw against it. Once. Then again. Not scratching. Signaling. Jack felt a chill move through him. He had seen Titan use that exact behavior years ago when identifying something specific. Something hidden. Emma stared at the door as if she had seen a ghost. The hallway suddenly felt much smaller. Much quieter. Jack looked from the dog to Emma. Tell me what is in that room. She did not answer. Instead, her eyes slowly filled with a fear she had managed to hide for years. Then Titan lowered his nose to the bottom of the door and inhaled deeply. And the moment he did, Emma realized the secret she had buried long ago was no longer buried at all. For several seconds, nobody moved. The narrow archive hallway seemed frozen in time. Dust floated through thin shafts of light spilling from a small window near the ceiling. The scent of old paper and aging wood filled the air. Titan remained beside the locked door, completely focused. His nose hovered inches above the floor. His ears stood forward. Every instinct told Jack the dog had found something important. Emma slowly stepped toward the hallway. Her face had become pale. Not frightened by Titan himself, but by what his presence meant. The years she had carefully stacked between herself and her past suddenly felt fragile. Like dry leaves before a storm. Jack glanced at her. Emma. She closed her eyes briefly. Then opened them again. The key is in my desk. Her voice sounded distant. Resigned. Neither explanation nor resistance remained. Only fatigue. Together they returned to the circulation desk. Emma opened a drawer and retrieved a small brass key attached to a faded blue ribbon. The ribbon caught Titan's attention immediately. The German shepherd lifted his head. His eyes locked onto it. Emma noticed. Sadness she could not hide crossed her face. I should have thrown it away years ago, she whispered. Jack accepted the key without replying. Moments later the lock clicked open. The archive room beyond was smaller than expected. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Old town records filled neatly labeled boxes. Dust covered everything. Nothing appeared unusual at first glance. Yet Titan entered the room with absolute certainty. He moved past shelves and storage bins without hesitation. Straight toward the far corner. There sat a narrow wooden trunk. Plain. Unremarkable. Forgotten. The kind of object people stopped seeing after enough years passed. Titan stopped beside it and sat. Jack looked at Emma. "Do you want to tell me what is inside?" She stared at the trunk for a long moment. The silence stretched. Finally she answered. "Memories." Jack carefully lifted the lid. Inside rested several personal items wrapped in cloth. An old photograph. A leather journal. A silver necklace. A folded newspaper clipping. And beneath them all, a framed picture hidden face down against the bottom of the trunk. The room seemed smaller with every object revealed. Emma stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly. Jack picked up the newspaper clipping first. The paper had yellowed with age. A photograph accompanied the article. A younger woman smiled beside a community center ribbon-cutting ceremony. The resemblance was unmistakable. It was Emma. Yet the name printed beneath the image was not Emma Brooks. Jack read it twice. Laura Bennett. The words hung heavily in the quiet room. Titan remained seated beside the trunk, watching. Emma lowered her eyes. The secret she had guarded for 7 years now rested openly in Jack's hands. "Laura Bennett," he said softly. She nodded. No denial. No excuses. Just acceptance. Outside, the distant cry of a seagull drifted through the open window. Harbor Point continued living its ordinary afternoon. Nobody knew that an entire life had just resurfaced inside a forgotten archive room. Jack looked from the article to Emma. Questions filled his mind. Why had she disappeared? Why change her name? Why hide for so long? But before he could ask any of them, Titan suddenly stood. The dog turned toward a second object inside the trunk. A photograph. And the moment Jack lifted it into the light, Emma's expression changed completely. Jack held the photograph carefully beneath the archive room light. The image had faded around the edges, but the faces remained clear. A younger Laura Bennett stood beside a community outreach event in another town years earlier. Children smiled around her. Volunteers filled the background. Nothing seemed unusual at first. Then Jack noticed where Titan was looking. The German Shepherd was not staring at Laura. He was staring at a man standing several feet behind her. The man appeared ordinary. Well-dressed. Friendly smile. Forgettable. Yet Titan's eyes never left him. Laura saw it immediately. Her shoulders sank. For a long moment she simply stared at the photograph in silence. The years seemed to settle heavily around her. Finally she sat down on a nearby storage crate and closed her eyes. Jack lowered the photograph. "Who is he?" he asked quietly. Laura opened her eyes again. There was no point hiding anymore. "His name is Richard Hale." The words felt difficult to say. Even now. Even after 7 years. Titan slowly approached and rested beside her feet. The familiar warmth of the dog seemed to steady her breathing. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the library windows. The sound filled the silence. Laura looked down at Titan and gently ran her fingers through the fur behind his ears. "I never thought he would remember." Jack frowned. "Titan knew him?" Laura nodded. A faint smile appeared through the sadness. "Years ago, before Harbor Point, I worked with several community programs across the state. Titan came to one of our veteran support events with you." Jack searched his memory. Hundreds of events. Hundreds of faces. Most had blurred together over time. But Titan's memory was different. The German Shepherd remembered through scent. Through emotion. Through moments people forgot. Laura pointed toward the photograph. Richard was there. Jack glanced back at the image. Titan remained fixed on the same man. Why does he matter? Laura looked toward the rain-streaked window. Because everything changed after that year. Her voice softened. I trusted him. The room fell quiet again. Jack listened. Laura rarely spoke about herself. Harbor Point knew only the version she allowed them to see. The woman who volunteered. The woman who smiled. The woman who never discussed yesterday. Richard managed several non-profit projects, she continued. Everyone admired him. Everyone believed him. She paused. Including me. Titan lowered his head onto her knee. The gesture seemed almost protective. Laura swallowed hard. When questions started appearing about financial records and missing donations, somehow the blame found its way to me. Jack's expression tightened. You were accused? Laura nodded. There was never enough evidence to prove anything. But there was enough doubt. The rain outside intensified. Harbor Point disappeared behind a curtain of gray water. I lost my reputation, Laura whispered. Friends stopped calling. Opportunities vanished. People looked at me differently. She glanced toward the photograph again. So I left. Jack understood more than he expected. Sometimes a lie did not need to be proven. Sometimes it only needed to survive long enough. Titan suddenly stood. His ears lifted. The German shepherd stepped closer to the photograph once more and touched the image of Richard Hale with his nose. Then he looked directly at Jack. Not at Laura. At Jack. The old dog seemed to be saying the story was not finished. And deep inside, Jack realized the same thing. Because if Titan had remembered Richard after all these years, there was a reason. A reason still hidden somewhere beyond that photograph. The rain continued long into the evening. Water streamed down the library windows while Harbor Point disappeared beneath a curtain of gray. Inside the archive room, Jack sat on an old wooden chair with the photograph resting across his knee. Titan remained beside the trunk, quiet and watchful. Laura stood near the shelves, arms folded tightly, staring at memories she had spent 7 years trying to outrun. The room smelled of paper, cedar, and rain. Nobody spoke for several minutes. Then Titan suddenly rose. His movement was small, but it immediately drew Jack's attention. The German shepherd walked past the trunk and stopped beside a row of storage boxes near the back wall. He lowered his nose and inhaled slowly. Once. Twice. Then he looked directly at Laura. Her expression changed. No, she whispered. That cannot still be here. Jack stood. What is it? Laura hesitated before walking toward the shelves. She knelt beside a faded cardboard box hidden behind town census records and carefully pulled it free. Dust covered the lid. A date had been written across the top in black marker. 7 years earlier. Laura stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside rested dozens of documents, old letters, event records, and volunteer files from the nonprofit organization where she had once worked. At the very bottom sat a sealed envelope. Titan immediately focused on it. The dog's ears lifted. His eyes never left the envelope. Laura slowly picked it up. Her hands trembled. I thought I destroyed this. Jack could hear the emotion in her voice. What is it? She looked down at the faded paper. A copy. The words barely escaped her lips. Carefully, she opened the envelope and removed several pages. The first page contained financial summaries. The second contained transaction approvals. The third carried signatures. Laura's breathing became shallow. Jack stepped closer. What are you seeing? She handed him the documents without answering. Jack studied the pages beneath the archive light. At first the information seemed ordinary. Then a pattern emerged. Names repeated. Approval chains overlapped. Dates matched the period Laura had described. One signature appeared again and again. Richard Hale. Jack looked up. These records were never reviewed. Laura shook her head. Nobody wanted to review them. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Titan sat beside her feet. The old dog seemed calmer now, as if another missing piece had finally surfaced. Jack continued reading. Buried among routine paperwork sat a handwritten note attached to one transaction report. The note was short. Only a few lines. Yet it changed everything. It clearly showed that Laura had raised concerns about discrepancies months before accusations were ever directed at her. She had not hidden problems. She had reported them. Jack stared at the page. This proves you were trying to stop it. Laura looked away. Tears gathered in her eyes. I know. The pain in those two words carried 7 years of silence. Titan gently rested his head against her knee. Laura placed a trembling hand on his fur. Outside, thunder rumbled somewhere beyond the bay. Inside, the truth felt closer than ever. But as Jack organized the documents, one detail stopped him cold. Written on the final page was a recent address. Not 7 years old. Recent. Richard Hale was still connected to Harbor Point. And for the first time, Jack realized this story was not buried in the past at all. The address remained on the table long after the rain stopped. Outside, Harbor Point settled into the quiet hours of the night. Streetlights reflected across wet pavement. The harbor bell echoed faintly through the darkness. Inside the archive room, Jack read the address again and again. It was only 3 miles away. 3 miles. After 7 years of questions, 7 years of silence, the answer had been sitting practically in their backyard. Laura stared at the paper without speaking. Titan lay beside her chair, but his eyes remained open. Watching. Waiting. The old German shepherd seemed to understand that something important was about to happen. Jack finally folded the documents and slipped them into a weatherproof folder. We need to know if he is still there, he said quietly. Laura looked down. I spent years trying not to know. Jack understood. Sometimes fear became a habit. Sometimes survival meant refusing to look back. Yet the expression on Laura's face had changed since finding the records. For the first time, he saw something stronger than fear. Hope. Small. Fragile. But real. The next morning arrived beneath a pale silver sky. Fog drifted across the coastline as Jack drove along a winding road outside town. Laura sat beside him. Titan occupied the back seat, unusually alert. The address led them toward an aging waterfront property overlooking a narrow inlet. It was not a mansion. Not a hidden compound. Just a modest house surrounded by cedar trees and weather-beaten fencing. The simplicity felt almost insulting after 7 years of mystery. Jack parked along the shoulder. Nobody moved for several seconds. Then Titan suddenly stood. His ears lifted. His nose pressed against the window. Jack followed the dog's gaze. An older man stepped onto the front porch carrying a coffee mug. Gray hair. Casual clothing. Ordinary appearance. Yet the moment Titan saw him, the German shepherd released a low sound deep in his throat. Not a warning. Recognition. Laura closed her eyes. It is him. Jack watched carefully. Richard Hale looked older than the photograph. Older than memory. But it was unmistakably the same man. Titan continued staring through the glass. Then something unexpected happened. Richard looked directly toward the parked truck. Their eyes met across the distance. For a brief moment, confusion crossed the older man's face. Then his attention shifted to Titan. The coffee mug nearly slipped from his hand. Jack saw the reaction instantly. Richard recognized the dog. Not the truck. Not Jack. The dog. Titan stepped forward, tail still, posture calm. Richard slowly descended the porch steps. There was no anger in his expression. No fear. Only shock. The kind that appears when the past arrives without warning. Laura opened the passenger door and stepped outside. The morning breeze moved through the cedar trees. Nobody spoke. The distance between them felt filled with 7 years of unanswered questions. Richard stopped several yards away. His eyes moved from Laura to Titan. Then back to Laura. Emotion spread across his face. Regret. Deep and immediate. Laura, he said softly. Hearing her real name spoken aloud after so many years seemed to shake something loose inside her. Titan walked forward and sat directly between them. The old German shepherd looked from one face to the other. As if he had spent 7 years carrying a message neither person was willing to hear. Then Richard looked down at the dog and whispered 5 words that changed everything. I have been looking too. The following morning arrives quietly, wrapped in pale gold sunlight. That spills across the porch and settles over the old wooden boards like a blessing that does not need words. The storm that once seemed endless is gone now. In its place comes the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of songbirds greeting a brand new day. The German shepherd lies near the doorway, head resting on his paws, watching the yard with calm amber eyes. There is no fear in them anymore. No desperation. Only peace. The Marine steps outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee, the familiar scent drifting into the cool morning air. He pauses for a moment, studying the dog. It is strange how much can change in such a short time. Only days ago, both of them were carrying wounds too heavy to name. Now they sit together beneath a bright American sky, neither needing to explain what the other already understands. The dog slowly rises and walks across the porch. His gait is stronger now. His coat catches the sunlight, revealing healthy shades of sable and gold beneath the scars that remain. Some marks never disappear completely. But they no longer define the story. The Marine kneels and scratches gently behind his ears. The dog closes his eyes for a moment, leaning into the touch with complete trust. A trust earned one quiet act at a time. Beyond the fence, neighbors begin their routines. A pickup truck rolls down the road. Children laugh somewhere in the distance. Ordinary sounds. Yet today they feel extraordinary. Because there was a time when neither man nor dog believed they would ever belong to a normal morning again. The Marine glances toward the horizon. Sunlight stretches across the fields, warming the earth inch by inch. It reminds him that healing rarely arrives all at once. It comes the way dawn comes. Slowly. Patiently. Without asking permission. The German shepherd suddenly lifts his head and trots toward the yard. For a second, the Marine wonders what caught his attention. Then he sees it. A small blue butterfly drifting above the grass. The dog follows it with playful curiosity, circling once before stopping completely still. The butterfly lands briefly on a weathered fence post. Then it rises again and disappears into the morning light. The Marine smiles. It is such a tiny thing. A moment most people would never notice. Yet somehow it feels important. The kind of moment that reminds a person how much beauty still exists in the world. The dog returns and settles beside him once more. Shoulder against knee. Companion against companion. No commands. No expectations. Just presence. Just loyalty. Just the quiet understanding that neither of them walks alone anymore. The wind moves gently through the trees. Somewhere above, clouds drift across an endless blue sky. The Marine reaches down and rests a hand on the dog's neck. The German Shepherd exhales slowly and closes his eyes. Together they sit in comfortable silence. And in that silence lives something greater than survival. Not victory. Not fame. Not fortune. Grace. The kind that arrives softly. The kind that asks for nothing in return. The kind that finds wounded souls when they least expect it. Some stories do not end with applause. They end with a porch, a sunrise, a faithful dog, and two hearts finally learning how to rest. Weeks pass like quiet pages turning in an old book. Summer settles gently over the valley, painting the fields in shades of green and gold. The small house no longer feels empty. Every room carries signs of life now. A water bowl beside the kitchen table. Paw prints near the back door after afternoon rain. A worn blanket resting beside the fireplace even though the weather no longer calls for a fire. The Marine notices these things every day. And every day, they make him smile. The German Shepherd has become part of the rhythm of the home. Each morning begins with the sound of paws crossing the wooden floor. Each evening ends with a familiar silhouette settling near the porch steps as the sun disappears beyond the distant hills. Some bonds arrive slowly. Then one day, they feel as though they have always existed. On a warm Saturday afternoon, the town gathers for its annual community picnic near the river. Families spread blankets beneath large oak trees. Children run through open grass carrying kites and laughter. The scent of barbecue drifts through the air. Music plays softly from speakers near the pavilion. The Marine almost decides not to attend. Old habits still whisper that solitude is safer. But the German Shepherd waits by the truck with patient expectation, tail moving gently from side to side. In the end, they go together. As they walk across the park, people greet them with warm smiles. Neighbors who once knew little more than his name now stop to shake his hand. Children ask if they can pet the dog. The shepherd sits calmly beside him, accepting each gentle touch with quiet dignity. An elderly woman smiles as she watches them pass. She says they look like they belong together. The Marine glances down at his companion and realizes she is right. Not because fate promised it. Not because life owed either of them anything. Simply because kindness created a place where healing could grow. Later that afternoon, while sitting beneath the shade of a large maple tree, the Marine watches the river flow past. The water moves steadily, carrying sunlight across its surface like scattered diamonds. The German Shepherd rests beside him, head against his boot. Neither speaks, yet both seem content with the conversation silence provides. The Marine remembers the dark days that came before. The loneliness. The grief. The feeling that something inside him had been permanently lost. Looking at the dog now, he understands something he could not see back then. Healing does not erase pain. It gives pain a place to rest. The breeze carries the distant sound of church bells from the center of town. Soft. Peaceful. Familiar. The shepherd lifts his head and listens for a moment before settling again. Around them, life continues in all its ordinary beauty. Families sharing meals. Friends telling stories. Children chasing fireflies as evening approaches. The Marine places a hand gently on the dog's shoulder. The shepherd leans closer. A simple gesture. Yet it says everything words cannot. As the first stars begin appearing above the valley, the sky turns deep shades of blue and silver. The Marine looks upward and smiles. Somewhere beyond sight, perhaps every act of mercy leaves its mark upon the world. Perhaps every kindness becomes a light for someone still walking through darkness. Beside him, the German Shepherd closes his eyes, completely at peace. And beneath a sky full of quiet promises, two once wounded souls sit together, no longer searching for home because, at last, they have found it in each other.